Hello there, I'm Philip Rice from St Giles Church in Desborough, and now I recently attended a Christians Against Poverty conference at York University, and I thought this morning I'd just share a few thoughts that came out of discussions and seminars that I attended while I was there. It was in a seminar about the current state of poverty in the United Kingdom that it was pointed out that before COVID-19, poverty was a serious problem in this country. But what's happened during the pandemic has made the situation much worse. We constantly hear talk about getting back to normal, despite the fact that the number of COVID-19 cases is steadily increasing. The number of hospital admissions due to COVID-19 is increasing. The number of admissions to intensive care is increasing, and the number of COVID-19 related deaths is also increasing. So it would really be good to get back to pre-COVID-19 scenario, but we know it isn't going to happen anytime soon. And though it might mean less poverty, given that it's got worse during that time, it might mean less poverty than we have today, but we know that pre-COVID the level of poverty was unacceptable. That's not the normal that I want to get back to. What I'd really like is that normal in the UK and in the rest of the world would mean the eradication of poverty. We know there's enough food in the world for everyone to be fed and for no one to go hungry. We know there's enough money in the world for everyone to be a millionaire. It's just not distributed fairly in the world because the world is broken. Despite there being enough to go round, in the UK right now, 1 in 8 people is suffering fuel poverty. And that's not going to get better with these latest price rises and the cost of gas. There are 1.7 million people who are in rent arrears. And because the temporary freeze on evictions has ended, there are now at least 1 million people seriously worried that they're going to be evicted from their homes. The world is broken. And the world doesn't know how to fix it. In Isaiah 58, God talks about his people being repairers of broken walls and restorers of streets and dwellings. And I believe, therefore, that it's up to us, God's people, to fix things. Not to get us back to normal, not to get us back to how things were before the pandemic, but to fix things properly, to build the world that God wants. Let me read you some more of that passage from Isaiah 58, where God says at the beginning that he's not interested in symbolic fasting. Instead, he wants his people to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke, to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter. When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. Then he says, your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here am I. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets and dwellings. In order to rebuild our broken world, we need to do it exactly what it says here in the book of the prophet Isaiah. Do away with the yoke of oppression, spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed. Normal is not good enough if it's just how things were before the pandemic. We need to build back better. Now that's an expression the former President Trump accused Joe Biden of stealing from Boris Johnson for his presidential campaign. But actually, I think it's one that Boris Johnson borrowed from the United Nations, who used it back in 2009 when they called on governments to seize the opportunity to build back better by creating more sustainable, resilient and inclusive societies. I'm not sure if Boris Johnson's version of building back better includes doing away with the £20 universal credit uplift just in time for winter and just as energy prices reach their highest level ever. But my idea of building back better is to help the oppressed, the downtrodden and the poor, to build a world in which everyone has enough. You might think that's too big a task, and if that's the case, then look at the book of Nehemiah and the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. In chapter 3 of the book of Nehemiah, it says, Eliashib, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hananel. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zaccur, son of Imri, built next to him. The fish gate was rebuilt by the sons of Hassenaah. They laid its beams and put its doors and bolts and bars in place. Meremoth, son of Uriah, the son of Hakkoz, repaired the next section. Next to him, Meshullam, son of Berechiah, the son of Meshezabel, made repairs, and next to him Zadok, son of Baana, also made repairs. The next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, and so it goes on. Each person building and repairing their part of the wall. You see, if everyone plays their part, the work of the Lord will come to fruition. Interestingly, the book of Nehemiah also says, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. Nevertheless, the work was done, and we can rebuild this broken world if we all do our bit, because God will bless our efforts and, like the loaves and fishes, will magnify our meagre offerings. So let us be the repairers of broken walls and restorers of streets and dwellings, and let's make this world a better world. Amen.